Hello everyone and welcome to the Daryl Talks podcast. Today we are less of the sexy stuff and we're on to music. This gentleman, this truly great friend of mine, he is Crowd of Oaks. So without further ado, welcome Ross.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. How are you doing?
Yeah, it's good. And before we start anything, Ross, you have done the intro, the outro for me. So I cannot thank you enough for that.
My pleasure. It was good to have a slightly different challenge from a musical perspective. And yeah, I enjoyed it. It was good fun.
Honestly, my interpretation of what I wanted to what came out was fantastic. Like, you did so good considering I don't know musical terms.
Right.
And I just sent you a couple of clips that I liked. And you managed to make something magic. So before we start, as always, I'd just like to do a few icebreaker questions. So the first question is, what is the most adventurous thing you've ever done?
Probably when I went interrailing around Europe for, I think it was about 5 weeks, quite a while ago.
What's interrailing? Sorry?
You basically buy a pass for rail travel across most of the operators in countries in different zones within Europe. And you can choose to get a pass just for one country or for, say, 3, 5, 7, 9 or the whole of Europe. And I think went for like a 7-country pass, valid for about 4 weeks, but managed to tag another holiday on the start of it as well. So,
Did you go by yourself?
No, I didn't. There were 2 of us, and it was in an age before the internet was really a thing, and definitely before mobile phones, and also before the euro. So every country still had their own currency. Show my age now, definitely. And all we were armed with was a pretty damn thick timetable that had all the countries and all the trains in it, and a big fold-out map of Europe with all the railway routes. So it was a fun challenge. It definitely had its ups and downs.
I can only imagine. Where did you sleep?
On
mix.
The trains. Yeah, on the trains. Well, funnily enough, the first night ended up sleeping on the beach because set off down to the southwest of France near the border with Spain to a town called Biarritz, and we hadn't booked any accommodation in advance because, I thought, well, you just rock up, find somewhere, it'll be fine. Yeah. But didn't anticipate.
À la française.
Ah oui. There was some kind of grand event on, and when we inquired everywhere, it was just absolutely full, apart from 4- and 5-star hotels, which would have been the whole budget. So it was a case of hunker down on the beach, try not to get abused by seagulls or run over by the tractor that was doing the beach combing early in the morning.
I was so worried with where you were going with that.
Well, I have.
Abused by French people.
Well, dressed as seagulls, it's possible.
So second question is, what would be your go-to karaoke song?
It has to be the Faith No More version of I'm Easy by the Commodores, which, when I used to hit the karaoke back in the day, was always the one I would look for, and a lot of fun to belt out and really try to hit those high notes.
Yeah,
it's all about the enthusiasm.
Absolutely. And I'm very much of the opinion that karaoke should never be sung well.
Oh no, that's not the point, is it?
I've been to places where they've got like basically a Mickey Bubbly impersonator singing a Mickey Bubbly song, and it just hurt my soul. I think he's a chiropractor actually in Saltash.
Who? Michael Bublé?
Yeah.
Is he? Oh, it's obviously needing a sideline. So he gets those notes.
So third and final question. What is an ick of yours?
Lack of manners, and you say road rage, when you've purposely given way for someone and they don't acknowledge it, and so you shout in a very British forced way, thank you, as they go past, and, all the usuals.
We're just known for our passive aggressiveness.
Exactly, yeah, that gets us through the day. It's actually part of the culture, isn't it?
Absolutely. So let's get into it. How do we know each other?
We know each other through our now wives.
I know. And they weren't wives when we first met.
It was that long ago.
Yeah, it's been a while actually. Because how long have you been married?
Oh, thanks for that. Right on the spot. It's been 9 years. 9 wonderful years.
9 wonderful years. And I made an absolute fool of myself at Ross's wedding. I overindulged in the beverage of alcohol, and I started a bit early. The photos just show there is not a photo where I am not beaming, almost to a comical sense. But I didn't really do anything embarrassing.
You didn't make a fool of yourself, but it's funny you say that because I was looking through a couple of them the other day, and there is one where you're doing this really almost like a Kenneth Williams shocked face, and every time
With
I
Dave
see
K
it,
in the back.
that's the one.
I know
it's
the
classic.
photo.
It's done the rounds.
Oh my God. Yeah. At some point in my mind, I was like, that's going to look sexy.
Maybe fleetingly so.
I mean, Liz stayed with me.
We didn't show her the picture.
No, I was so drunk the morning after that I proper fell in the shower. And I mean, like, both feet up in the air. So, yeah, so we know each other through our wives. They work together. You met Crystal through work as well.
Yeah, that's right.
And I already knew Liz. And we started double dating a bit, didn't we?
We did. It got a bit weird, but then we set the boundaries and it was okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so when we first met, you were... Was it an IT manager?
Yeah, that's right.
What's that?
Oh, that's a good
I
question.
manage IT.
Yes. So, certain level of responsibility for the IT team of support techs and analysts, and ensuring that IT projects are delivered on time and on budget, and also contributing to sort of longer term IT strategy for the business, I guess.
God, it's like you just...
You said it wasn't going to be sexy this time.
Yeah.
You're right.
Lock up your wives.
Yeah.
So, and since then, you're still in the same industry, but you've stepped away in like a...
Narrowed the focus down, and at the moment I'm concentrating on sort of database and application solutions development.
It's alongside.
It's being able to concentrate and focus and deep dive into a narrow number of areas, but try and deliver a better solution for it.
Does that suit your like personality better?
I think it does, because I'm better when I'm able to concentrate on fewer things but do it really well.
Yeah.
Rather than having to keep changing between lots of different things that are striving for my attention over a short time. So, yeah, it's working out better for me.
Which is amazing, because obviously I know what we're coming on to, which is, well, spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about the album you've released. And one of my biggest questions is work, children, writing of music, playing of music, and producing of music.
Mm-hmm.
For somebody that likes to concentrate on just one thing... As we've previously said, you've got an album out now. How did you get to writing an album?
So, like a lot of people who were used to playing live music in whatever form, on whatever scale, when the global pandemic hit, everything came to a grinding halt. And I started to really feel that impact of not having that outlet anymore. So, being able to go out into pubs and parties and sort of mini scale festivals, as we were doing, and playing music, singing, playing guitar, engaging with the public. Really, when that was taken away, started to feel the impact of it. So it made sense that playing guitar at home, playing music, was obviously an initial response to that. But then I sort of thought about it, and we had written stuff in the past as a duo or as a band, and had other people involved. And at that time I thought, well, given how everything's supposed to work in isolation now, it's probably the right opportunity to just develop something by myself. So it would serve as an outlet to provide that creative means that had disappeared. It fitted with the requirement at the time in that you couldn't engage easily with other people. Although there were still ways and means you could do it, but I thought, let's write something that's sort of uncompromising, that I can just do it completely how I want to do it, for right or for wrong, because there are good things and bad things about taking that approach. And after a while, after songs started to come together, I didn't set out initially to create an album, but as that process developed, there were songs that were fitting together well, and there were themes that were sitting together. And it just sort of naturally progressed into being a collection of songs. And I thought, well, let's just do an album and do something with it. And I was going to just put some songs up on, I think it was SoundCloud, So the first one or two got released there, but then I started to get slightly bigger ideas and talking with other people and friends who had recorded and released their own stuff as well. They were encouraging me to, just push it as much as you can and make the best of it that you can. And it made sense too, because it felt like it might be a sort of a once in a lifetime opportunity because of the circumstances around it. So it really all grew from there.
Yeah, so it took you 2021 to 2024?
Yeah, just over 3 years from the initial idea to actually getting it to a stage of completion and release.
Is that because you had to balance? Because obviously you've got children. Did you write everything first, or did you write bits? How did you sort of like bring it all together?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. It was trying to balance all those things, but I purposely didn't want to rush it too much, although there were times when it felt like it was just dragging on. And at one point I was ready to step away from it altogether, but I'm glad I kind of had a little break and went back to it, because it helped to refresh the perspective, which is good for anything, really. Applies to a lot of areas of life. And it started off probably as a batch of 2 or 3 songs, and then I would record them. But there was a huge learning curve in terms of how to record, the equipment to use, the software to use, and then the biggest challenge of all was getting it to sound like it wasn't something some guy had just recorded in his bedroom with as small a budget as possible.
Sounds like you're describing this podcast.
Oh my god, retract. And that's what took up the biggest bulk of the time. I would joke to people and say the writing songs part was easy. It was getting it to mix properly and then to master it, getting all the levels correct, not only within the songs but across the songs, trying to make it sound cohesive. And then the hardest part for me personally was going back and making changes that, although perhaps most people wouldn't have noticed, I would have every time I listened to it, but also those I knew were fundamentally wrong. And I knew it would take a lot of work to correct it, but I thought I want to deliver something that I can say that I'm proud of. So I can only do that if I've taken every step possible to achieve that. And so over time, more songs were written, and then as I learned these techniques, I would go and reapply them to old songs. And some of the songs I was listening to for 2 years, and then suddenly thought that bit needs to change, or I'd write a new part and swap it out. So it was a real evolution, and some things just were changing up until the last minute.
Where do you get your inspiration for the lyric writing aspect?
A lot of different sources.
Because your lyrics are very poetic.
Thank you.
Without being too nice about it. but listening to it, it's almost poetry in the way you describe things. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And
Again,
I really appreciate that. That's really kind. Because I've written poetry or words and lyrics for quite a few years, and I used to write poetry because, again, it was that sort of form of creative expression, but you didn't have to write it thinking about melody and how it would fit in a song, and all the different considerations you have to give it, because it's quite different when you're writing something that's going to be sung and performed and recorded to something that's just written, and whoever reads it within their own voice. And at least one of the songs on the album is actually a poem that I wrote a number of years ago, because I was going back through, because you say about inspiration, so I would go back to stuff that I'd written before, because I had reams and reams of stuff, and thought, well, if I'm not revisiting it, it's probably a bit wasted, because I could have had a really fertile period a few years back.
Well, by all accounts, you're very fertile.
Well, thank you very much. And it would be a shame not to sort of leverage that. A lot of inspiration would come from day-to-day life, either through personal experience, and some of that again was put down into poems that were written at that time or were written during the creation of the album. Some stuff would come from watching the news, from experience of others. Some of it is just fantasy. Some of it is just imagining a situation that is plausible, but you're putting yourself in that person's shoes. I was always conscious not to try and write too much that was cliched from a middle-aged man's perspective. And as a father, that was even more difficult, because I mentioned about being inspired or getting ideas from things like watching the news. And it's just a horror show these days. You turn it on and you think, my God, there's no hope. And then when you've got children of your own, it just sends you off into even more despair. And it's difficult to kind of not let that affect you too much, or to maintain optimism about it all, because you're obviously trying to bring people into the world and hoping that it's a stable, safe world of opportunity and freedom. But I've always tended to write about things a little more on the pessimistic or negative side, because I think it's good to spread awareness. I think it's good to let people know that they're not the only ones that might be feeling that way. And it's why people listen to sad songs, because they get that sort of release, that it's like a cathartic release to do so. Sing along if you like, feel the emotion.
A sucker for a sad song.
Oh God, yeah.
Oh my
That's
Lord.
why Radiohead have been so successful, isn't it? Because
yeah, it's all in minor.
Absolutely, yeah. And people can relate to that, and there's some kind of shared joy in that sadness.
So where did you draw your musical inspirations from? Because from the album, I picked out a whole spread of different music genres. So I picked out almost like a country Lynyrd Skynyrd style in a couple of songs, and then we got like Pearl Jam vibes, and I know you're a big fan of Pearl Jam, so I think that would have been impossible not to draw some form of, because if that's the music you like, that's the music you should make. There's also some like 90s Guns N' Roses, AC/DC sort of riffs in there. Was that on purpose, or sorry, I get really excited about it because these are all bands and stuff that I really like and have liked throughout the years.
Yeah,
but
no, that's cool.
Was there anything that really stood out?
It's interesting. It's really interesting hearing other people's interpretation of it, because when you're involved in something like this, you're so subjective, and it's really difficult to step outside of it and evaluate it. And I didn't set out to create any one thing in particular or to create particular sounds. And you're right that there is a real mix of genres, because the music that I listen to and I enjoy and I love is such a mix of genres, from soul to funk to metal to rock to country to jazz. And I think I didn't try to force anything, and I didn't sit down and say, I want to write a song that sounds like this or that. But some of the bands that people have said they can hear in the songs that come back have at times been bands I didn't even think were in those sounds. And you mentioned Pearl Jam, and yeah, my favourite band of all time. But I would never want to sound like them for fear of becoming a cheap imitation, as other bands have done in the past.
Yeah.
But if there is a degree of influence, then I'm more than happy with that, because
yeah, I think influence is probably the better word for it than inspiration.
Plagiarism.
Because, well, yeah.
But the process for a lot of the songs would be not sitting down going, I'm going to write a song now, but there'd be snatched moments, say, when the kids had gone to bed and there was 20 minutes, and I'd pick up the guitar in the living room and I would just play, and I wouldn't think about too much what I was playing. Sometimes I'd be playing other people's songs, and then I would just come up with a riff or a chord sequence, and I just think, I like that, let's record that on the phone so we've got it, come back to it later, and then start
that's what you did with
lyrics.
me.
So that's what I did with you. Yeah, sent you the clips and while doing the dishes. How does this sound, Daz?
In terms of like how you choreograph your songs, is it a mixed bag as well, where you sometimes the chorus will smack you in the teeth first, or you build to the chorus because you started like almost like a storytelling style of writing?
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, that's quite a complex question, like quite open question,
sure,
but...
and I'm not sure if saying yes is the correct response. There are tried, tested, and true approaches to songwriting, certainly in, say, a rock genre, in that you can have an intro, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, outro. It works because it's just a great way to take a listener through the journey.
Knowing that will seem familiar, and that is very appealing to a lot of people.
And And it does work, and a number of the songs on the record do follow that structure or slight variations on it. But there were one or two where I did think about how the song was structured, what could be changed, because it is important to have. I wanted to have variation throughout the album, so it got a bit, and this is where the IT knowledge comes in, it got a bit nerdy in that there were spreadsheets, and so there were song tempos, there were song keys, there were song lengths, and then there were song structures, because what I didn't want to do is just have something that was completely the same all the way through, and the listener would kind of their ears would get tired without realising, and it would put them off what they were listening to, or it just wouldn't have enough variation for them to want to listen all the way through it. It helped to analyse the songs and think, well, we've got 4 that follow this structure or quite close to it, so let's have something different, or go back to one of those and swap some parts around. Conifers is a good example of that, because how it ended up on the record is complete arse about face to how it started. And at one point it had about a 5-minute bridge, and I would go for walks at lunchtime and I'd listen to it, and I really liked it, but it came a day when I realised that's great, but I'm the only one that's going to like that.
So it's funny you say that, because I was listening to Conifers today, and I was surprised, and I don't know why, but the instrumentals that you put in, like the bridges, I didn't have you down as like enjoying that sort of thing. And it's impressive, because I imagine you being chords and riffs, basically, with a bit of bass. So when I put on your album, and then there's these solos being put in, these instrumental, I was very impressed.
Thank you. That's good to hear. But I love a solo, but I always try to make it expressive and not just do a solo for a solo's sake, which isn't easy. And I'm not the best solo player by a long stretch.
I've never been able to do it.
It's difficult because it's different disciplines, isn't it? It's trying to play rhythm and play that well. It's trying to play bass and understand the role that plays, and then there's solos as well.
But some of your songs have the bass riff is key. I thought, because you're predominantly a guitarist, or that I know of, and for you to then stick in some Flea style bass riffs in there, that was a shock to me as well.
The bass should never be underestimated in its importance, and sometimes its importance is just sitting back playing 4 notes in a loop whilst everything else moves. But there are a lot of great songs where the bass is doing the heavy lifting, and you don't necessarily realise, but if it wasn't, the song just wouldn't have the same effect. And sometimes it's taking the less is more approach, so it's more what you don't play, and you leave the space for the other instruments to either come in and go out of that space to make the song what it is. But I didn't want it to be a guitar record. I wanted it to be, well, a music record where each instrument at different times would sort of take the limelight. So there's parts where, like quite rightly say, the bass is the main riff, or it's leading the song and everything moves around it. And there's other songs where the drums really are building the core foundation of that song, and other instruments are coming in and going out of it.
What order did you learn instruments in there?
So it started with guitar, and then sort of picked bass up at the same time, and I'd move between the two. Drums, I didn't start until probably around 2010, 2011. And I don't actually play drums on the record. It's programmed drum samples. So
amazing.
The samples are fantastic. It's such a good pack that was bought that I bought for the software. I was really pleased with it. And there's different ways you can approach it. You could do it through a MIDI approach, so you could get a MIDI keyboard and then program it so, bass snare as you tap your fingers. Yeah. But I did it the hard way because, again, it's this huge learning curve, and I thought, well, I know how to do it, so let's just crack on with it. So every beat of every part of the kit was placed in position to, underpin the drum.
That sounds
that
minging.
Goes with. Yeah, my eyes did fall out of my head a few times, especially when you consider something like a hi-hat that's going every second for 4 minutes. And there was quite a bit of copy and paste that would go on, but I was also conscious that I didn't want to grid everything. I didn't want everything to be to the second formulaic, because then it would sound like it was just made on a computer, completely. So
Yeah.
I wanted a bit of looseness, a bit of swing, so the songs could breathe, they could move, it could follow how the guitars and the bass was moving because they were played. And although I'd use a sort of rudimentary metronome to help not go too far out of time, because when I started and I didn't do that and I tried to put drums to it, the way it was speeding up or slowing down was just unacceptable.
These are things you don't think about when
No.
you don't record and produce music.
Yeah.
I guess even if you record it, you don't.
Yeah, you take it for granted.
Yeah, if you just play.
And even, professional musicians in the most expensive studios in the world, the drummer will still play to a click track a lot of the time, because it's important for the benefit of all the other musicians and to get the right feel that you want on that track. And sometimes the producer will go in and just quantize everything, so he'll get all the samples and just pull them into a grid so they're tight, if that's what you want to go for as the end result. So it's all about working towards what your end goal is, really. But I always wanted to maintain that sense of making it sound as live and as much like it is an actual band playing together as possible.
Oh, I think you've done really well with that.
Thanks.
So what equipment did you already have, or did you have to invest in this as a hobby?
Probably a bit of half and half. So I already had guitars, but my good friend Dan lent me his bass, and within the rules of what was allowed, he cycled from his house in St. Budo during the pandemic on a quite icy day with his bass on his back and brought it over and delivered it to me. So full credit to him for doing that. And I've still got it. I must give him a call, actually. You might have forgot. I had a mic, because I use mics when practicing, when playing live, and stands and shields and stuff, but didn't have the software. And I started off with the free version to kind of dip toe in the water, and then realised, I like it. So then went to the mid-level version and then bought some software packs to go with that. So it's starting to creep up a bit now, the expense, because...
but once you have it...
You have it.
Yeah.
That's it. And there's always additional add-ons and packs and plugins you can get. So I bought a really good amp emulator. So I just plug in directly to Focusrite box, as I see before me here, which enables your guitar, your instrumentation to talk to your computer. So that was another... Actually, that was a gift from the wife. I'm very well received, that.
Sorry to interject.
Yeah, sure.
But I asked Ross right at the beginning, when it was just a concept and of an idea for a podcast, I said to him, basically, what do I need? Because I'd Googled it, and it was overwhelming with the equipment and how you could end up spending £2,000 on a microphone, or you could spend £30, but they're next to each other in terms of reviews and everything. So I went to a reliable source, somebody I trusted, but they weren't available. So then I asked Ross, and he said straight out, I would definitely recommend this, this, and this. So the bit that you were talking about, you sent me the link to, which led me to getting this one, because I realised that I needed two, and I couldn't afford the 2-1 of the one you sent me.
Right.
So that is literally how it worked.
Yeah, and it's working out well.
Yeah, so far.
It's doing the job,
so
isn't it?
Far.
Yeah, it's a good bit of kit. So I ended up over time probably spending more on it than initially anticipated, but it was necessary to get the end result, and there is more yet that I could still buy.
Are you planning on doing any more?
I am, yeah. I've already started writing, and there was some leftovers from what was written for the album, but I'm taking a different approach to it this time. I think I'm going to wait until I've got fully fledged songs, because previously what I would do is get sort of the base of a song and record it, and then record another part on top of that, and then what would come last would be the lyrics. And then I realised that could cause problems, because then moving parts around or changing things was a lot of work. Because if you're in a band situation, if you've got 4 other people, you just say, hi guys, let's go through that again, but let's do these changes, and it's done. When it's you've got to do each part through in turn. So you've already got 4 or 5 times the work, and you don't know how it's going to work, how it's going to sound until you've done that. So there were times when I made those changes and it didn't work. So it was a load of time that came to nothing. But I've got a presence on Spotify. I've got the account that enables me to upload to it. There's a channel, there's a platform, and I think, well, it's a good outlet. I'm not playing live at the moment, so
I was going to say, would there be a plan to take your albums live? I appreciate you probably need like a band behind you, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
that's another challenge in itself.
It is, and I would really like to hear how some of those songs work in a true band setup. So at some point, as time and other factors allow,
I guess it'd be like a 4 or 5 piece, wouldn't it?
Yeah, even more with some of the embellishments, because of course, when you've sat in front of a PC and you've got
it's easy to do,
hundreds
isn't it?
of tracks,
you want it to sound the best version of what you have in your head, don't you? So
yeah, and you've got access to all these instruments. So there's orchestras on tracks, there's trumpets and tubas on tracks as well. So
now I don't mean to plug myself, but I was in a band,
a quite legendary band.
Yes, Turtlehead. It's been a while since I've dusted off these old pipes. So if you do need a backing vocalist, I'm your man.
Well, this is the other approach that I'm considering, because the record has just been me 90%, except for Crystal sings backing on a couple of tracks.
She's brilliant.
And my oldest son sings backing on one as well.
It is incredible. I love the fact that you've included your family, because
it's a family affair.
Yeah.
But I'm now definitely more open to collaboration and contributors for future stuff, because it just increases the potential of what you can do. X-Fault. So yeah, the Ruler song. Should we do an updated version?
Oh, we definitely should. People, you are in for a treat. Watch this space.
First.
So have you ever, if you had to give advice to somebody who has always had this burning desire to start, they've always written melodies in their heads or maybe scribbled a few poems down and stuff, but never taken it to that next level, what advice would you give? Did you have a moment, or did you know it was kind of always going to happen?
No, I always took the approach of, I just like to write stuff down and to write songs for my own enjoyment and entertainment. And again, just that process, just similar to how someone might paint for the joy of it and they don't display or sell their artwork anywhere, or anything of a creative sense that you do. I was reading this the other day, I can't remember who said it. It might have been legendary producer Rick Rubin, who said you should just write songs for yourself. And then out of all those songs you write, if some of them you think you want to release or you feel confident enough about releasing, putting out into the public domain, then do it. But if you just set out to write stuff, to create stuff, to satisfy the enjoyment of others, I think that's a much more difficult way to do it, because you would always feel under pressure. And I think you'd be putting a pinch on that creative flow, because it would be in the back of your mind that whatever you were doing, it had to pass that kind of validation of others. So just indulge that creativeness and write, whether it be poetry or music or lyrics, whatever it is, record it in some fashion if you can, and then revisit it and pick out the things you like the most that you think you'd like others to hear.
What routes did you use to learn the bits that you didn't know? God
bless the internet. No end of YouTube videos and tutorials and websites, friends as well. A good friend John was really helpful, especially for sort of the beginning stages of understanding how the software I used worked, because he's got the same one, and understanding the principles, the fundamentals of it. And once that clicked into place, that was a really solid foundation from which to build, and a lot of trial and error as well, trying different techniques, seeing what works and what doesn't, and being prepared to put in the time knowing that you might not get the result from it that you want, which can be a bit galling at times. But
when you said that there was a moment where you almost said do one, are you okay to talk about what caused that and what stage you were at and what sort of turned it?
Yeah, definitely. I think I felt I was plateauing in my learning and I just wasn't getting the results that I wanted. And I think at the time I was finding it difficult to find the time, because I could get snapshots of 20 minutes here and there, or maybe an hour or so, but I needed blocks. I needed half a day. And at one point I did do that. So I would book time off work, and it would be days when the family weren't at home, they were at nursery and school, and they were at work as well. So I could just have that distraction-free time. And I've always taken the approach, or tried to, it's not easy when you're in it. If something's not working out, if something's difficult, step away from it. Go and do something else. Forget about it. Have a distraction. Sometimes it's just going out for a walk for 20 minutes. Sometimes it's not thinking about it for a few days or a week. Come back to it fresh and try again. And so I really had to apply that in this situation. But I'm glad I did persevere, because I came back to it and I thought, well, I've got this far and this is what I want to get to. And if I just knuckle down and push on, I'm pretty sure I can get there.
Obviously, I've done a few episodes now, and that seems to be the attitude of success. Because every single person has had that moment. They've had what I like to call an F-it moment, where it starts.
Yep.
Something caused that moment, including myself. And then they reach that big roadblock. But so many people fall off at that point. And I think we've probably all got examples where we've done that in the past and stuff. But I'm so glad that I carry on, I've carried on doing this. And there was a bit earlier when you were talking about the producer and what he said, which really, really resonated with me, because when you're talking about doing it for other people, I get suckered into that sometimes, and I try and be a bit more of an entertainer. As we were saying off air, I struggle sometimes with what I want this podcast to be about, what avenue I want it to go down. I really want it to be a serious podcast with a funny element to it.
Sure.
Not a funny podcast with some serious elements. And sometimes I get that confused in episodes, I think. But on reflection, I keep going, and I'm still learning, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. You hone your craft, don't you? And for example, when you're in a band, you can practice and you can practice and you can practice, but until you actually go out and play a gig, it doesn't mean anything. And a gig has the value of about 10 practices. And that's where you really get to know the worth of what you're doing. And over time, the podcast will evolve, won't it? And it will change, and you'll find things that work better or they don't. And I think you've absolutely achieved that balance that you say.
Thank you.
And not getting it the other way around. But it's as long as you're happy about it and you're achieving what you set out to do.
That's it.
Because I questioned, in that moment when I nearly stepped away and said, forget it, there were times when I thought, well, who's going to want to listen to this? And, I don't like the way that sounds. And I've always had hang-ups about my voice. But I thought, well, I'm just doing it for me and for my immediate family. And if they love it, then all the more better for it. And if other people enjoy it, then great. So it lives out on Spotify and other streamers, and if people stumble across it and they like it, then that's brilliant. But if they don't, it doesn't matter, because I still set out to do what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I enjoy listening to it myself, just about, because I had to listen to it a lot. And as long as I still enjoy it, then I think, well, I've done something right.
Yeah, see, because obviously I have to listen to my own voice.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do think that I love the sound of my own voice.
Well, if you just stop talking for a minute.
I know, but I really dislike it. However, when I'm editing and stuff, they're like the episodes. Although I hate the process of editing, I love listening back to the laughs and the bits where I'm like, oh my God, that got quite deep. You know, I didn't see that coming. And, you know, oh my God, I really shouldn't have said that, which is more often than not. So, yeah, but remembering the why you're doing it and just trying to regurgitate that almost like on a daily, when you're going through the process, I guess, is so important. And I'm so glad that you've said that, because for anybody who is like aspiring to go out and just do something, try to remember why you're doing it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Do it for the love of it and the enjoyment that you get from it. Don't string yourself up by having sort of commercial targets or viewers or listener targets from the outset, because I think it would just erode the enjoyment from it, wouldn't it? If that comes along, and if you find ways to make that gather pace and to increase, then great, all the better for it. But if you do that as your prime motivation, I think you'll struggle.
Plans for the future then? Yeah.
Well, one of my bands I was in from about, let me work this out quickly, 27 years ago or thereabouts. We're having a reunion in a couple of weeks. One of the guys who lives in Australia now is back over in Cornwall for a few weeks and said, you know what, should we meet up and go through some old songs for the shits and giggles of it?
Crikey.
So yeah, we're gonna see how that goes. That'll be interesting. And just to play
That's
it again
cool.
in a band setup. Yeah,
That
yeah.
is good.
It's nothing like a midlife crisis than revisiting stuff from your teens, is it? So
Yeah, but everything comes around, doesn't it? So
it does, yeah. And you never know until you take these opportunities and explore it. You don't know what doors might open or what else could develop from it. But in terms of writing and releasing, no albums, because they're just such a big body of work to do and takes a long time. But there will be singles or maybe EPs, small collections of songs that find their way hopefully onto Spotify and such like.
I listened to an interview with the lead singer of Mumford and Sons.
Oh yeah,
and he said that he was never, well, at that time, I apologise if somebody not fact checks.
Fake news.
Yep, still fat. If anybody fact checks this, but he said that he's not going to release another album. He's only going to release EPs because he finds it more fun releasing in bursts. But I think I like the idea. Don't get me wrong, I love an album.
But the industry has changed so much.
You don't have to now.
No, you don't.
A playlist. Playlists weren't always around.
No,
so
you had to. Back when vinyl was the only option, you pretty much had to listen through the other songs to get to the one that you really liked. But now here we are in the vinyl resurgence era. And I think there's a real split between the approach to listening to music, those that just want to have the immediate hit of a song to grab them, and if it's not within 20 seconds, they move on, to those that are prepared to let an album wash over them for 45 minutes start to finish with no interruptions. And again, it's just something about it, something having it. It's large, you can read the liner notes, you can look and study the pictures, and a lot of people still like to do that, to have that physical submersion into the album format as well.
Yeah. Do you hope your sons will play music?
It'd be great if they do. And my eldest has developed an interest and he likes to pick up the guitar, and I'm going to get him a 3/4 size guitar because he's quite serious about it. For his birthday, you're going to get that. But I've always tried to not force anything in terms of likes upon them. But it really is a case of osmosis. And of course, they're surrounded by it. And then when he heard me playing the songs on guitar, or when we're playing music around the house, he's developed that interest. And because he knew Crystal had sung on the album, then he said, well, I want to sing on the album. So it was only fair that I let him do his bit.
Well, in which case there is no hope for Lyra and Jackson, because if osmosis is a thing, I mean, I know it's a thing, but I mean, in the sense that we're talking, they're going to end up bellends.
That is not what I was expecting you to say. Of course, that is completely untrue. But you are musical.
Yeah, I'm again very, very faddy, so I can play enough piano that I can do all the chords and play with two hands. I can play guitar much better than piano, but still not very good. Harmonica, I can play harmonica quite well as well. Yeah, that's quite.
Don't hear enough harmonica these days.
No, absolutely. One question I did want to ask is, where did Crowd of Oaks come from? ChatGPT.
Yeah, pretty much. Coming up with a name was so hard. I went through so many different possibilities. Some of them had a lot of meaning and some not so much. And in the end, I just wanted to go for something that had a kind of a visual meaning behind it. And you could think there was depth to it as well. But really, it was just a term. I was initially going to release stuff under my name, but I thought I wanted to give the whole project an identity, so that if it did evolve or change in the future, it sort of had that room to do so.
I was going to say, because
than...
Crowd of Oaks does have band feels.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which led me to think that maybe there is room for a band behind you. Well, thank you so much, Ross. I've just enjoyed this. It feels really good, and I'm so glad you've been able to come on, and I wish you the best success. Guys, please go and have a listen. Just give it a go. What's the worst that could happen? You waste 45 minutes of your life.
Your ears could bleed. Thanks, Daz. Really enjoyed it.
So there we have it, another fantastic episode. Thank you again, Ross. Guys, please keep sharing, keep following, keep participating. I really appreciate it. Cheers.